State religion in the United States continued. Now, there were creatures in the past that evolutionists used to display as intermediate fossils. These included the duck-billed platypus, the Archaeopteryx, that is an extinct bird with claws, featured there in the middle, and the whale. Now, these have proven not to be intermediate fossils for various reasons. In fact, the whale evolutionary charts actually included fraudulent pictures. But, and this can't be emphasized enough, textbook writers, professors, teachers, etc. still believe and teach the so-called fact that the intermediate fossils actually exist. And this is taught in our school classrooms and even at universities. Now, it's clear that evolution, as defined earlier, is not taking place today. There's not even a hint of that. And of course, no one has ever witnessed evolution in the past. Without the intermediate fossils, there is literally no evidence whatsoever that evolution ever occurred. But what have evolutionists said about the subject? Well, the late Stephen Jay Gould, arguably the top spokesman for evolution at the end of the last century, said the absence of fossil evidence for intermediate stages between major transitions in organic design has been a persistent and nagging problem for gradualistic accounts of evolution. Dr. Colin Patterson, former senior paleontologist at the British Museum of Natural History, responded, "Well, I fully agree with your comments on the lack of direct illustration of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would have certainly included them." Dr. D.V. Ager, former president of the British Geological Association, was just as blunt about the subject. He said, "It must be significant that nearly all the evolutionary stories I learned as a student has now been debunked. The point emerges that if we examine the fossil record in detail, whether at the level of orders or of species, we find, over and over again, not gradual evolution, but the sudden explosion of one group at the expense of another." Now, the word explosion is a way of saying that there are no hints of evolution because the fossils that are in between, the known kinds of creatures, are simply missing, since everything appeared in its fully developed state, and thus exploded onto the scene. Now, this is precisely what creationists have been saying all along, that the various kinds of creatures were distinct and that the fossil record would not show any so-called merging of one kind into another. Dr. Mark Ridley, a zoologist at Oxford, made a huge confession. He said, in any case, no real evolutionist, whether gradualistic or punctuationist, uses the fossil record as evidence in favor of the theory of evolution as opposed to special creation. The fossil record could be considered to be evolution's worst enemy. Now let's look at mutations. Mutations are considered the vehicle for evolution. But this idea has some serious problems with it. Mutations are genetic accidents. Down syndrome is one example of a mutation in humans. Mutations subtract information from the organism or the creature. Evolution requires just the opposite. It requires an addition of useful information on somewhat of a consistent basis. Since all intelligent information requires intelligence to form it, and also to communicate that information, no one has ever found any exception to that, then this information that is needed would need an intelligent designer to add the information. Mutations are only neutral if there's no ill effects that can be determined from it, or they are harmful, or that they are deadly, but they are never good permanently. Evolution would require just the opposite. That is, effects that are neutral, helpful, or increasingly helpful in complexity. Well, I know evolutionists often come back with the fact that mutations of bacteria, when they are in the presence of some kind of antibiotic, often help them survive. And that is true, but it is still a mutation. Number one, it is still a loss of information within that bacteria. Number two, it is still the same kind of bacteria, thus no evolution has taken place. Number three, a disadvantage can be a temporary advantage in certain situations. For example, it is well known that blindness can cause someone to develop very sensitive hearing. Let's say that this hearing allows someone to know, because of this extra sensitive hearing ability, that there is a serious problem before everyone else knows about it. With this early warning, it is certainly possible to save all of the lives in the group just by giving an early warning. Now, this would be a great example of how a disadvantage can actually be a temporary advantage. But no one would still choose to be blind because it might save their lives someday. These mutated bacteria are still weaker than their normal counterparts because of the mutation. If they are placed back into a mixed population, the mutated bacteria die off sooner than the non-mutated bacteria. Evolution occurring by mutations would be similar to trying to build a non-interest bearing savings account by always withdrawing money. It just simply will not work in real life. Now, until evolutionists can prove that mutations are positive, mutations become another huge stumbling block for the theory. The very vehicle that is supposed to carry evolution, that is, mutations, is heading in exactly the wrong direction. Thank you for watching these videos, and thank you for visiting evosecrets.com.